Hi, how are you? This is Dr. Damaris Grossman, your integrative family nurse practitioner. And thank you for joining in on the Mindfully Integrative Show. So today we have an awesome guest, Mindful Chat with Michael Rubino. He is American Restoration, the mold medic, and he has so many years of experience and a decade in just American restoration and generations of mold expertise. So I'd love for you guys to chat with him. And thanks for joining us on the show, Michael.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I love different people, in the space of integrative health and just showing some different insights that most people may not know about. And I think that mold is kind of underlooked, but people know about like a general idea. They just really don't have a dive in. So
Sure.
most of the guests, they just initially say, what's a little fun fact that people don't know about you?
What's a little fun fact people don't know about me? Well, I'm a second generation mold remediation contractor, if you can believe of such a thing. My father has been in the restoration industry since I'm 5 years old. So I've been around construction and restoration my entire life.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I just saw buildings upon buildings, and you were saying that you live in the Florida area, but your company
Yep.
is throughout the country, correct?
Yeah, we're nationwide. We have offices in New York, LA, Tampa as well, and we pretty much just cover nationwide. We're a unique company, which I'll be
Mhm.
happy to dive into, which makes us, a little bit different than what your traditional restoration companies are.
Okay. Well, overall, let's talk about kind of how you got into this. I know it's in your family, but how it became something, I would say a passion for you. You're called the mold medic. So what exactly got you into it? Was there something on for you? Was there family that was affected? What got you to be like, this is part of where I want to go? Even though my family's into it, I really am into it too.
Yeah, so basically, been around construction pretty much my entire life. I mean, I actually got my first injury using a plastic saw, cutting a piece of wood a little bit too close to where my dad was cutting the wood, and
Oh,
so I've just been involved in construction and just loved it since I was a child.
right.
There's many different paths you can take in construction, right? You can be a new home builder, you can be a renovation contractor, kind of remodeling kitchens and bathrooms. Restoration is something that is really more on like an emergency service basis.
Mm,
And my dad primarily focused on fire restoration.
okay.
And where I took an interest really was in the mold sector. Um, and I think really the main reason why I did that is I saw this disparity between remediation tactics, which were far more in the construction field than they were really in the scientific or medical field. And I realized quickly that there were some things that we were missing as an industry. And basically how that came to be is I would go on meetings with my dad, and there would be, a home insurance advisor there that would be there to adjust the claim. And the way they looked at mold, you can tell was just like, it's not a big deal. Throw some bleach on it, paint over it. The insurance companies weren't really looking to fix the problem the right way. And
Gotcha.
that after Hurricane Sandy, because I'm from the Northeast originally, and when Hurricane Sandy battered the New Jersey, New York area, I started seeing people getting sick after that because homes were not remediated properly. Insurance companies took way too long to, handle the claims, and there's just a lot of problems that ensued from that. And for about a decade thereafter, I'm still re-remediating homes that were remediated. People are really sick, and yeah, I'm seeing
Mhm.
the debilitating effects of it firsthand. That's when I realized, like, okay, you know what? I love the idea of being able to help somebody, not just build a nicer kitchen or a nicer bathroom, but really to help solve problems that the industry seemed, slow to tackle. So that was when I kind of dove into mold and really started doing a lot of research and looking into, microbiology, and instead of just construction, because, most of the time it was just rip out this wall, and all is good when you do that. But when you look at it, and, mold has roots called hyphae that grow into the structure, you're leaving mold behind in the way in which they were looking at remediation originally. So,
Mhm.
I really just started doing projects, working with mold inspectors that were doing progressive testing, really getting down to the hyphal fragment pieces of mold, if you will, and understanding how that could potentially impact somebody and their health, and really getting down to, I mean, just an insane level of perfection. And it just led down this path where I started working with immunocompromised individuals almost exclusively, because the way in which I was doing things seemed to be the most effective strategy for those subset of the population. And it led to the Mold Medic book being written, because I wanted to share what I was doing with everybody who's willing to learn about it, because I think that at the end of the day, we have to move the conversation forward, and that's what my passion is this time.
I love it. I mean, you're like, we just talked just briefly before, and you were saying the connection of mold, maybe in the health field, we know of it, but, and then trying to really where it's actually affecting someone in their home, realizing that the quick fix isn't going to be the solution, just like anything else, as we talk about in integrative health and we talk about in wellness. It's a process and it's a work in progress, and it's not a quick solution. So you're trying to go into an individual's home and decrease them from these ailments. Now, what kind of ailments are you seeing with this mold, and what kind of mold is out there?
So I would say the ailments that I'm seeing a lot of is chronic fatigue, brain fog, cognitive difficulties, skin rashes, hives, eczema, respiratory issues, difficulty breathing, the onset of a cold that never seems to go away,
Right.
allergy-like symptoms. Those are the big ones. I feel like my job really is to connect dots, and I think that's where I've had a lot of success with. I'm looking at different pieces of the puzzle that's already out there, and I'm
Right.
putting them together. For instance, the EPA and the American Lung Association, both of them talk about particulate, right? And one of the biggest dangers of human health is really small particles. Now, on the EPA's website, on the American Lung Association's website, you can go on there and Google exactly what I'm saying. You'll see anything smaller than 10 micrometers in particle size happens to pose the greatest health risk to humans and animals, of course. Now, mold happens to be smaller than 10 micrometers. And so we're not at that stage yet where we're definitively saying mold is definitely a health risk. We're just not there yet. We actually got there in the 90s and then started backtracking.
Oh, it's
Just
a
because
health risk. It's definitely a health risk.
we agree for sure.
Yes.
I'm talking about the general medical community in terms of like everyone being on the same page, or
Gotcha.
the EPA's website was modified to, it said there was a health risk. Now it's saying, well, some people can be allergic to it. You also have mold professionals in my industry that say these phrases like mold is ubiquitous, which means mold is everywhere, right?
Mm,
And that phrase is a misnomer. Yes, mold is part of our ecosystem.
right.
Yes, we're not building bubbles around our houses, so you will have some mold come in. But to say mold is ubiquitous
Mm,
is really unfair. And here's why. Because there's a big difference between some mold spores coming in naturally from outdoors and a mold infestation of your house, right? So if you have the opportunity for mold to grow, which we all know mold requires water. So if you have various roof leaks or other leaks and water intrusion, things like that, that create the opportunity for mold to grow. Now, once that colony is growing inside your home, it's producing more particles, right, that you're breathing in,
right.
more than you would if you were outside.
Of
So
course.
to say that mold can't make people sick because it's everywhere, that statement alone is just unprofessional, because you're not looking at the full picture. Anything in life, you can take a fragment of something and argue that one little point
Right.
without looking
Of
at the
course.
big picture.
I hear
And I
that
feel
all the
like
time. Yeah.
exactly where we're at in the air professional community, we're still in the infancy stage to understanding all the effects of indoor pathogens, mold, etc. And we need a lot of help from the medical community too, because those kind of go hand in hand. You need the professionals like me to say mold's a problem. We definitely need to be more aware of it. You also need the medical community to say that exact same thing. Mold is a problem. We see it impacting patients all over the country. And once we have enough agreement there, right, you start to see some changes in laws and things like that. So if we kind of go back to like smoking cigarettes and look at that, it took us 50 years to say maybe we shouldn't smoke cigarettes, probably a health risk,
Right, right.
right?
Yeah, there's
We're,
definitely a need in the policies to change a little bit more because I feel like
for
all
sure.
they talk about is black mold. And it's like there's
Yes.
more than black mold and you I don't know how many there are. There's probably hundreds of mold species that are out
Hundreds of
there.
thousands.
Hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands,
Yes.
see.
So
And
we know, yeah. Yeah, we know very little about everything, right? So you make a really valid point. Like we have this phrase called toxic black mold, and that's referring to a species called Stachybotrys, right? And yes, we know it's a toxigenic mold, but there are other toxigenic molds there's one they called Cotomium. It also grows typically in chronic water damage. But then there's, again, this confusion about mold in general. You
Mhm.
can have species of mold that are not themselves toxic, but can produce something toxic called a mycotoxin, which is a toxin produced by a fungus. So once you have a mold species, whether it's toxic or not, producing a mycotoxin, the byproduct becomes toxic, right? That enters the body and can disrupt the immune system. So it's very interesting, and I always look at both sides of the coin, right? There's an argument that someone said, well, you can't really know that the house is making you sick. It could be the food you're eating, because mycotoxins can be in coffee, it can be in food, etc.
Right, right.
And that argument is right, but
But
if
the
you have
amount, the
mycotoxins in the
concentration,
body,
right? The
right,
concentration
right,
has to be a lot more extreme for it to just
of
be like a
course,
one dose.
right.
So that the house is going to have a lot higher concentration.
Odds are the handful of peanuts that you ate that could have had some mold is not going to produce the amount of levels of mycotoxins that you would encounter through a mold problem, right? Whether at your home or work. So we make these like counter arguments for whatever reason. I don't understand why we can't just say, hey, look, we take 20,000 breaths per day. Let's make sure our air quality is really well so that we don't have these types of issues. I don't understand why we can't make these suggestions to be more mindful without opposition. I guess
Right.
it's you probably experience it a lot in the medical community too.
Oh, I do. I
Um,
mean,
it,
I
it's go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, it's just that you have opposition when you are trying to oppose a different solution or alternative, even if it's not anything that's harmful. You're just trying to make a better solution or another solution and open people's eyes to some other, like something new. And you're saying, so take me to tests that you might do, or a scenario that you had a patient, or you don't have patients, but like clients that you've had
Yeah.
where you said these immune compromised. Take me to like one patient or one client that you've had and tests that they've done with their medical provider, or the connecting of dots that you're saying.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to that with the whole mycotoxin thing,
Right.
you'll have people will do mycotoxin analysis. One of the most popular ones is the urine analysis to detect mycotoxin levels. Of
There's
course,
different
there's
labs that do the mold testing from, I think, Geneva. There's people probably know
yes,
which companies do you use and recommend?
I believe it's the lab in New York. Drawing a blank.
That's
It's
okay. We'll
not
look at
real
it.
time labs. That's the house, but there's one out of New York, and I will think of it before the conversation ends for sure. That does the urine testing,
Okay.
and there's also new technology that, of course, is in Europe that has given us some access to out of Germany, and that's the epigenetics testing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but epigenetics
Epigenetics.
testing,
I do know epigenetics. I don't know in reference to mold, but I do know epigenetics.
there's a lab out of Germany that is performing epigenetics testing, which is literally finding the layers of toxicity that are resting on top of the DNA. So it can search for heavy metals, mold toxicity, et cetera. And due to Rule 101 of evidence law, DNA testing is an acceptable form of evidence. So this would actually be what we need, I think, to turn the corner
Mhm.
as it becomes more readily available in the United States. And because I guess urine analysis, right? It doesn't technically cover the Rule 101 of evidence law, and you can't trace it back to what the true cause was.
Right.
So it makes it difficult to definitively say that, hey, the house was making them sick, which would then turn into, okay, we need to fix the house. And so I
Right.
think we need to just get down to the basics in that regard, so that we can start to say with a definitive proof, this is what is causing the issues, this is the laws that need to change around that, so you can then lobby for change. That's why I kind of said, like, I feel like we're at the 20-year stage out of that
Gotcha.
50-year cycle of smoking cigarettes, right? Like, we know it's bad, we have a
Mhm.
very good hunch that it's bad for us, but we
Right.
haven't truly dialed down, you know, there's a lot more study that's needed essentially to kind of push things forward. So I know we got sidetracked a little
No,
bit
it's okay. I was
talking.
just kind of, and then, a story of like someone, or a
Yeah.
client that you worked with.
One of the most interesting cases that I'm working on now is a woman named Shannon, and she actually
She
was on
okay
a
with
feeding
using her
tube.
name? She's okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. She's going to be doing some podcasts with us to kind of share her story.
Perfect.
Shannon, located out of Florida, was actually on a feeding tube. Now, was mold the cause of her being on a feeding tube? We don't know for sure. What we do know is that mold definitely exacerbated her condition. And here's why I feel comfortable saying that, because we found, after doing testing of the home, we found pretty toxic levels of mold exposure inside the home. This is
Mhm.
way more mold she was breathing inside her house than she would outside of her
Outside.
house, right? So
Wow.
within a week of recommending that she moves out of the house, she rented an RV. She put an RV on her property. Within 1 week of moving from inside the house to inside the RV, about 15 feet away from the house, she was able to start eating on her own again and got the feeding tube removed. So, you know, is that a coincidence? Maybe, but
I doubt it. So,
I don't believe in
the reason
coincidences.
I can see where you're coming from it. So hear me on the provider side, right? So we do a
Mhm.
test, we test for mold. We may think that may be a susceptibility. There may be other tests that I might look in the GI map, but her GI gastrointestinal tract has probably been disrupted, and
Yep.
inflammatories, leaky gut, things that might have been disrupted from all of that mold exposure. And of course, she's not going to want to eat you know, um, being removed from that environment may have decreased her inflammatory response. And that
Yeah.
could have, I mean, is it a yes or no? But it does sound coincidental. Also, her overall psychological brain fog might have changed. So then it might have given her mood better. So when I look at it medically, it does make there is a similarity, or at least I don't say coincidence, but there could be a definitely correlation.
Yeah, it's the reason I speak in jargon like that is because obviously people look to pick things apart. So I want to say
Yeah, of course. You
the
always have to say, okay,
the
possible, right?
the coincidence, I don't believe in coincidences. It was a big coincidence that one
Yeah,
week after she moved out, she
right.
started feeling better. She's not 100%, of course, but she's kind of started that road to recovery. She's with a doctor. The doctor is seeing, I mean, amazing improvements that they really cannot explain,
Right.
right? Other than you're no longer living in the house. This is miraculous, right? So when I look at cases like that, and I have cases like that all over the place. There's a case in New York where a woman who used to be a triathlete has been restricted to a wheelchair. Has been exposed to toxic levels of mold when testing the house. Bought another house trying to escape that problem. That house has mold. So she's in this situation where she needs to remediate to move on. And, her doctor's pretty sure that the environment is definitely impacting her. The levels kind of line up with what's going on inside of her body, with what's going inside of the home. And, she's going to perform remediation, and we'll see. I can tell you, with over 1,000 cases of working with people, after remediation, they start to feel better.
Right.
Maybe it's a huge coincidence. It's 1,000 times over. Me, I personally think that, based upon the research that I've done, when you connect the dots, an abundance of particles, doesn't matter what they are. They could be VOCs, could be heavy metals, formaldehyde, mold, of course, bacteria, anything. You have an abundance of particles that you're breathing in. Your body is working overtime to remove these particles,
Yeah, the
right? So,
autoimmune system is in overdrive, and so you're going to
right,
get that inflammatory response. I think what
right,
it is people the skeptical thinking is, oh no, it's not that. But environmental health is just as important. Mold health is as a whole, I guess, but really environmental
right.
health is a factor, and people just are not taking that as, that's why we do have we need more regulations, we need more conversations, and also providers and healthcare professionals to understand the importance of it. So I like that you've been on this call and that you're talking with us about this, because I think people need a little bit of a wake up call that no, it's not just in our heads, or someone isn't just thinking. It's an idea to at least bring up the conversation. And does it matter about location? Because you're saying New York, Florida. Can you have
You
any of these
know,
issues anywhere?
yeah, you can, because
Okay.
unfortunately, from the second a house is built, it starts to decay. It's just the basic law of physics here.
Okay.
So it's every house that you live in is essentially a ticking time bomb in terms of some water is going to make its way in at some point.
Right.
And if you're not quick to respond to that, mold can grow in as quickly as 24 hours. Most people don't know that. They think it takes months or years.
Hmm.
So if you have a leak and you don't repair it properly, or you're not practicing prevention methodologies by maybe doing some inspections of the home annually to make sure everything looks like it's in proper order, uh, as the house decays, it settles, right? You have some cracks that occur, and water makes its way in eventually. And if it goes unnoticed or unchecked, it can kind of result in a problem where you start having, growth, whether it's bacteria developing, making its way into the area, because sometimes water passes through animal proteins. Sometimes, you have drain leaks from a drain pipe, which could accompany bacteria. Now you have bacteria and bacterial toxins. You could have mold growth, right? So all of these things lead to indoor pathogens, which again create these particles that become aerosolized, enter our breathing zone, enter our body, and cause adverse health reactions. It's not rocket science. I didn't become a doctor in microbiology to figure this out. I just started connecting the dots, right? And I think we just need to really create the awareness around this and kind of change the thinking with the way we build, maintain, and restore homes. And I think if we do that, there's a lot of prevention that can be done, that can really change this whole thing. Because I think a lot of the issue people have is, maintaining a house can be costly, and I get that. But there's a way to build the house in the first place where there's not as much maintenance needed. I think we're kind of focused so much more on energy code these days than we are on, building a house that's meant to, decay, if you
Hmm.
will, that has these preventative measures in place that can slow the decay down, or that can, as one barrier breaks, there's another barrier behind that doesn't allow the
Right.
water to intrude, things like that. If we start building with that in mind, we're definitely going to have a healthier populace. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's because we know that any particles, eventually do overload the immune system.
I mean, you make a great point. I mean, I think what it is part of it is awareness, right? That initial awareness, and getting more people to understand what it is and how it's affecting us health wise. And then you're saying, building better homes, and then restoring those homes that are older. There's definitely a need. I haven't dived much into your book yet, but I will. Would you like to share a couple tips in your book, or a mindful way for the audience before you go?
Yes, definitely. Being mindful, I would say prevention is the cheapest form of cure, right? I think if you are doing an annual inspection, checking your roofs tend to leak. Um, Winds can shift the shingles around, create pathways for water to intrude. Checking your roof and making sure that's in tip-top shape. Checking your doors and windows to make sure that they're sealed properly, because again, that a lot of them are sealed with a silicone sealant,
Mhm.
and there's some give there, but over time they can crack depending on the quality of sealant used.
Mhm.
When you're doing a renovation, make sure that your bathroom is built properly with a waterproofing membrane behind the tile. People don't realize, but grout is porous, so water actually does make its way behind the grout. If it doesn't have, if it isn't built with that in mind and have something that kind of signals towards the drain,
Yeah.
You can have mold starting to grow in the cavity behind the tile. And so,
Mm,
it's things like that that I think we need to be mindful of, when we're looking at, just making sure we have the best air quality we can have. There's no harm in making sure that we're building better, we're restoring homes better,
yeah.
and things like that.
No, I love the fact of what you're, those little tips, because I feel like every little step to kind of get you to where you need so that you can breathe better air. I just like, I mean, I've seen more and more of this mold like issues with patients. And at first, I would have to say I initially was skeptical because I didn't know enough about that. I was like,
Sure.
oh, it's black mold. Okay. All right, maybe it's just a little something. But more and more, I'm realizing our environment really has a major effect on our overall and the and people just need more understanding. And like, I think you're right, policies do need to change, and they'll get there. What is a way that people can reach you, or if you have any upcoming events? I know you have a new book called The Mold Medic, but I'd love to
Yes.
for people to reach out. I'll have the links, but what would you like to share with the audience before you go
All
today,
right.
or
So
anything else?
the the best way to connect with me would be on Instagram. I'm very
Mhm.
active there. I do a lot of cool tips, tricks to avoid mold in the first place on
Love
there.
it.
Every day I'm releasing something. My goal is to really prevent, mold from growing in the first place. That
Love it.
if I can accomplish that and just some societal shift there, that would be amazing. You can also find me at allamericanrestoration.com. There is a ton of free resources on there, tips for preventing mold, education regarding mold, the history of mold, all of that stuff. You'll find on the website free of charge. And then if you go to the moldmedic.com, you can learn more about the book, where to buy the book, how to get
Cool.
access to it. And that's the best way to reach me.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have it on. I mean, we reached out to each other through Instagram and through your team, and yeah, I think that they do need to read your book. Look online. I love that Instagram has all these different ways that you can put these tips on there. So I'm going to be checking it out, and I'll put all the links online. I really appreciate you being on the show. Is there anything additional that you'd like to add in before we go? Of
Yeah, I would just say, in terms of being mindful, I really appreciate you having me on your show and creating this
course.
platform where, where we can educate people. And I leave you with this: be mindful of air quality. I think that it's something that hasn't even been on our list of things. We've always been, I need to drink more water, I need to exercise more, I
Yes.
need to
No,
eat better food, right? But now we need to really, if we want to be health and wellness here, we have to look at air quality as a piece of the puzzle. So be mindful of it, don't neglect it. And I think that your health will improve as a result.
I love it. I mean, we have to breathe a breath, like you said. What is it? 20,000? I don't even think I knew that. 20,000. I thought it was around 20. So yeah, but the fact
Roughly
that you have
20,000 breaths per day. Yeah,
see, think about that. Our breath that we breathe each and every day. If it's not clear, then we're bringing in all this mess. Thank you so
exactly.
much. It was such a pleasure, and you have a great rest of your day. And thank you, listeners,
Likewise.
for checking in to the Mindfully Integrative Show. And I will check back with you soon. And you guys make sure you have a mindful way each and every day. Bye.